Hey everyone, good afternoon. My name is Sam. My pronouns are they, them, and I am the Director of Member Experience here at Advent Co-working. We are a creative co-working community and event space, yoga studio, podcast studio, art gallery. Most importantly, we are a community and we love getting to put on our weekly event, Advent Member Talks. So each week features a different Advent member on the topic of their choosing. And it gives our members an opportunity to share their skills and their knowledge, not only with fellow Advent members, but with the greater Charlotte community. So we love putting this on. We love getting to promote our members and share all the awesome work that they do. And I'm really excited that we're joined by David today. And David's going to be talking about community, the strength of diversity and inclusivity. So please give your attention to David. If you have any questions, go ahead, type those into the comments, and we'll do some Q&A at the end. David, over to you.
Okay, first of all, thanks, Sam. Thanks, Advent Co-working. I appreciate the opportunity. Um, of course, my name is David Roundtree, and what I am is actually a licensed clinical social worker. So I'm a licensed therapist in both North and South Carolina, and I happen to be currently a program director for what we call Bunk 57 Ministries. Bunk 57 Ministries is a nonprofit organization, and it was actually started in Bunk 57 in Walker State Prison, which is in Georgia. And unfortunately, my nephew had an experience that we thought would lead to probation. It led to a couple years incarceration in Walker State Prison. From that point, he was actually built into the man that he is today. So he was challenged to do something with that situation. And so what he did was create Bunk 57 Ministries, the nonprofit, and also works with the, the, the state of North Carolina and also Mecklenburg County to assist 12 boys at a time for 12 months to help them through with their with their problems and their issues as it relates to their court cases, school discipline, things of that nature. So 12 boys, 12 months, and then they move on to the next 12 boys. So I'm very honored to serve in the capacity, at least for right now, as program director of Bunk 57 Ministries. So today, what I wanted to share with you and talk about is actually what I know about. So I thought about doing like a presentation, and then I thought, well, maybe that would be a little bit over the top because I only have maybe about 20, 25 minutes. I'm going to try to condense that time so I don't bore you to tears. So what I'll do is I want to just have a heart-to-heart talk with you. And so as it relates to community, as it relates to diversity, as it relates to inclusivity, I wanted to share some of my personal experiences with you. My first experience with diversity and inclusivity came at actually a plant that I used to work in. I was told that there was going to be a diversity committee that was going to start up, and I was chosen to, I guess, to be a part of that group. So, and I was told to go and introduce myself to the chair of the committee, and as I did, she kind of looked at me and said, "Are you sure you're diverse? Are you diverse enough to be in this?" And so, needless to say, that didn't go anywhere. But diversity simply means that we're going to celebrate our differences. We're going to look at each other and say, okay, yeah, big deal, we're different. But also, we're going to look at the strengths and what that means, what it means to be in relationship with a person who is the so-called other or a person who is different. And so diversity is something to be celebrated, not to be fearful of or to be scared away from. So diversity involves relationships, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. I want to talk to you about that specifically because as we look at this as our country, as we look at our city, our town, we can see that we're a very polarized nation. Not only has COVID allowed us to isolate and really not know our neighbors, but even our politics has polarized us, has moved us from one area to the other. You're either this or you're that. And so because of that, we hide behind things like religion. We hide behind nationalities. We hide behind the flag. We hide behind all these things to say, this is who I am. But as we hide behind those things, what's projected is mostly fear of the other. And so I want to talk about that a little bit today, and especially as it relates to me, okay, as a black man. Many of you, well, I guess none of you know, unless you know me personally, is that I'm an old jarhead. What that means is that I had the experience of being in the United States Marine Corps, right? So one of the things that I learned from there, even as far back as boot camp in Paris Island, is that they broke us down so that they can build us back up, right? So, and even as we work out, when we work out, we're actually tearing up our muscle tissue, and the muscle tissue is being broken down, and then as it reconnects, it reconnects stronger. And as we work out and we exercise more and more, we're actually tearing down our body so we can build it back up. And so, as it relates to our society, there's some things in our society that are really bad, and they are broken, right? We say they are broken, but there are other things in place that have worked really well, and we need to focus on those things to in order to better our society, right? So everybody says, I love America, this is the land of opportunity, things like that. And when we say that, we say what we're saying, what I hear is that a lot of people are saying, I love America more than you love America. And so we end up getting into this contest to prove that we love America more. So whether that be, putting a big flag on the back of your truck or your motorcycle, or whether that be walking around in your camis or camouflage, whatever that means to you, is we kind of hide behind those things. But I want to encourage you to come out from hiding, right? So to have a face to face with somebody who is different than you, so that you can celebrate them and they can celebrate you, right? So with that being said, I want to talk about how can we have a hope for our future. How in the world can we have a hope and a future in a country that is basically is polarized? Everything, you're either this or you're that. There's no in between. You're either thinking like me, you're either voting like me, you're either looking like me, or you're the other, right? So how can we close that distance, close that gap? We can do that by what I call an exercise in hope. An exercise in hope, right? So I'm going to give you 3 points. The first point I want to talk about is, as we have this exercise in hope, is that of expecting. That of expecting. So what do we expect? We expect the very best in others, right? So if we don't know them, our proclivity or our bent is to kind of be fearful. We don't know them. We have to be cautious of them because they might hurt me, right? And if we pull them closer to us, we become more vulnerable and things like that. But that's what relationship requires. Relationship is a risk, right? So we risk the hurt. We actually risk being vulnerable to another individual. So what can we expect? First of all, you can't pull everybody close to you, right? So you want to look at the person, you want to size them up as we normally do, but you don't want to do that in a sense that it makes you better than them, right? Because everybody that you see is made in what we call the imago Dei, the image of God, right? So whether that person is the same race or gender or different race or gender, if that person dresses funny, if they smell funny, doesn't even matter. If they're homeless or if they live in a mansion, that person is made in the imago Dei. So that person, regardless if they live in Tent City or if they live on at Lake Norman or Ballantyne, that person has dignity, has worth, has value, right? And they are to be treated as such until they prove themselves differently. They are to be treated as such, right? So everybody is worthy of that dignity and respect. So as we expect, the very best out of each other, that pulls us into relationship with one another, right? And so the other thing I wanted to share with you as far as exercise and hope, the first is expectation. The second is engagement, right? So at some point you have to challenge yourself and you have to also challenge others, but the goal of the challenge is to grow together. In South Africa, there's this phrase that is used, don't know a whole lot about it, but I am learning, and it's called Ubuntu. Ubuntu. And it means I am because we are. And it points to community. And as it relates to, as an African American man, as it relates to the African American culture, we can see that we can go back, even back into the 50s and 60s, in the days of MLK, Martin Luther King, when Martin Luther King talked about the beloved community. Now, this concept of a beloved community was not originally his. It was not originally, it's not specifically or exclusively a Christian concept, but it was a concept that he wanted to practice, and he would continue to point that in a direction of our nation's government and also of our communities, but to us also individually and personally. Because if we would buy into the concept of the beloved community, we would also understand and know that we are part of that community. But not only that, everybody else that we come into contact with is part of that beloved community. That means that everybody within the community would have to have respect, dignity, and value. Everybody would have to be respected. So it didn't matter if it was a guy who would stagger down the street because he was, inebriated or what have you. It didn't matter if it was the doctor who was kind of well off. It didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was everybody would have to have respect, dignity, and understand their worth and value within that community. That would mean also that if I was to see you and you were hungry and I had to give you, I would give to you. I would build up that because in building you, I build myself. My community is built up and we're stronger because all of us are better. So it goes back to that Ubuntu. I am because we are. It goes back to the community. And so I wanted to encourage us to engage. Now, what that's going to look like is, as I said earlier, it's going to look like taking some risk, right? So if we see where we are right now, maybe we engage with others by engaging with a person who does not look like us, right? So if it means that you're a person, and hopefully after we come out of this corona craze, maybe we can engage more in coffee houses, in restaurants, in houses of worship. But what if you did this? Instead of just inviting your best friend to a coffee house, what if you invited a person who didn't look like you? What if you invited a person who you didn't agree with politically? What that would do is basically humanize the other person. What if you could, pay for their $5 coffee and it would be all on you? What if you could do that on a regular basis? What that would do is build relationship between you and that other person, and you would be able to see that that person again has dignity, worth, and value, and that person maybe is not somebody to be feared, but somebody to be that I can engage with on a regular basis. Maybe now, from instead of just hanging out with everybody who looks like me or who votes like me or who thinks like me, maybe now I can go to a different house of worship and engage with some of those people. Or maybe I can do something else and engage with the other. So to the point where we become so comfortable with each other that when you find us at the Carolina Panthers game, or as the Charlotte Hornets are now on the upswing, maybe a Charlotte Hornets game. Maybe we can engage with the other like that, so that the other becomes us and we become united in community. The other thing, the last thing that I want to talk to you about is encouraging one another. So the exercise in hope involves engagement, it involves expectation, but it also involves encouragement because this is a work, and anything that is worthy of any kind of value, there's going to be some opposition to come against that, right? So we kind of get fatigued as it relates to the work that we put in. So if we continue to put in the work and continue to strive for a better Charlotte, or better Mecklenburg County, or better America. As we continue to do that, the fatigue factor will set in. And so I want to say to encourage you to also use the ability to encourage somebody else. So, what that's going to look like is for us to get together on a regular basis. We have to be intentional. We have to get together to say, here is our goal, here's what we're working for. We're not coming together to argue. We're coming together to see who we are, to introduce ourselves to one another, even to the point where maybe we can introduce our new friend or our new person to the families or to our houses of worship, or to go out in the community with them and be seen with them, because there's not a lot of this is seen. And it's kind of the concept of bringing us back into community. I heard a quote today, and the quote goes like this: "The reason mountain climbers are tied together is to keep the sane ones from going home." Right? So the reason mountain climbers are tied together is to keep the sane one from going home. So in this, understand that you will get tired. You will, it will feel like a meeting that you have to continue to go to, unless you become family, unless you become community, unless you get to the point where you are friends with them, right? So I'll say this, and I'll close out. So our exercise in hope involves expectation, engagement, and encouragement. I want to close with this, and that is the concept of Sankofa. So, as many of you know, Sankofa comes from some say Ghana, but definitely somewhere in West Africa. It's a concept where the symbol of Sankofa is that of a bird with an egg in its mouth, and it's looking backwards while going forward. Right. So when we look at that, I think that there are some principles there that we can use. San simply means to return. Ko means to go, and fa, the Sankofa, the fa means to look, to seek, and to take. So the concept of all of that is to say we need to look back, take an honest look at our history, not just as Africans or African Americans, but as Americans, period. We need to take an honest look at our history. There's some things that America did that was absolutely wonderful. But if we're going to be honest and take an honest look at our history, not all of it was good. We need to acknowledge that so that we can accept what is and then move forward. So the moving forward means that we're going to continue to expect, to engage, and to encourage. We're going to continue to make progress. And then there's that concept of hope. So the bird that's looking back, moving forward, has an egg in its mouth. The concept of the future, right? So it's carrying the future. And then as it relates to hope, hope simply means the ability to look beyond today to see a better tomorrow, right? The ability to look beyond today to be a better tomorrow. So I want to leave at that. I want to close with that. And I want to thank you all for listening to me. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your what you do. And I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. I am because we are. That's what a beautiful expression that that is. So thank you for all that knowledge. So for everyone watching, if you have any questions, go ahead and comment those. I do see a few coming in already. So from Cameron, what do you think are some of the hardest divisions, or other quote groups that we need to bridge between to build the spirit of Ubuntu?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, I'll say this. I'll talk about my experience, and then I'll try to answer that question. I worked on what we call an ACT team. An ACT team is just a group of medical, mental health professionals that actually try to reduce the number of persons who were flooding the emergency rooms in North Carolina, well, all over the nation. And so we were very effective. We were considered one of the best in the state of North Carolina. We work with people with severe, persistent mental illnesses. And when my first job actually out of grad school was working with an ACT team. So the ACT team was not me going to Charlotte with people who were used to looking at my black face, right? The ACT team, I was a therapist on an ACT team, and my assignment was to drive through Stanley and Cabarrus counties on some dirt roads and some places that had Confederate flags. They were trailer parks. That was my job, right? When I first got the job, I thought this is going to be awful. I'm going to have to call police and explain all this and that. When I first got the job, I remember going out to those places, and I had not just one, but I had like 5 or 6 persons who had severe mental illnesses like schizophrenia, things like that. In addition to that, they grew up in that environment, so they were racist environments. I can honestly say that after I created the relationship, or after we created the relationship with each other, that those were some of the most trustworthy relationships that I had. And I would didn't look forward to tearing up my car on a dirt road, but in terms of getting to the home and working with those individuals, I can honestly say that those were some of the best, I guess, buddies that I worked with, because they became my buddies and not just my client. And so if you repeat the question, I'm going to try to answer it a little better, because I said all that to set myself up.
Yeah, so the question from Cameron, what do you think are some of the hardest divisions or quote other groups that we need to bridge between to build the spirit of Ubuntu?
Okay, so I think one of the hardest, I don't know about the hardest, but some of the most challenging ones are definitely those that involve gender, because it's today's world is not just like it was in honestly like it was in the 50s. You know, there were some people who were not comfortable in their own skin, and they just had to grin and bear it. Some guys, for example, honestly, would do things like carry pianos on their backs and try to do everything to show that they were super masculine, hyper masculine, super strong. They would hide behind things like that. So I think that's one of the things that we have to get to a point where, whether you buy into it or not, you have to accept a person for who they are. And so I think it's going to be a challenge for a lot of people, because, especially in our culture, we have guys with a lot of machismo. There's a lot of hyper masculinity, and people really don't know what masculinity is, and they think that that's it. And so there's going to be some challenges there. I think the other challenges, if you look at our last national election, is the political challenge. So there are a lot of people who don't understand how in the world could that person vote the way they did, and they're my neighbor. You know, how are we supposed to get along after that? So I think that's going to be another big challenge, the political challenges, and also the challenges as it relates to religion and our faith. I think we're going to have to not hide behind our faith, but actually be proud of who we are. We're all made in the imago Dei. We're all made in the image of God, and we have to accept the other person for who they are. They may not believe like you believe, and that may be a huge challenge. And in America, we've always kind of been divided to say, you know, we're this or we're that, and it's great to be who you are. And I think those are going to be some huge challenges. But do I believe we can make it? I absolutely do, if we exercise our hope and our faith.
Absolutely. And we actually just got two more questions that really tie into to where we are right now. So I'm going to read the one that we got messaged, and then we have a question from Valerie. So, first, how do you balance the need to be inclusive with the need for safety slash comfort? If you, like you were talking about, if you want to engage with someone who holds beliefs that are harmful to your community, yeah, how do you balance that?
I think one of the ways, this is just a suggestion, of balancing that is not to challenge the group, but the individual. So try to look for a person, and also, you know, as it relates to your safety, look for a person who is open to have a discussion, as opposed to someone who is just violent, and that's all they're really seeking. They want you to, you know, to pull you away from your agenda by making things violent and making it ugly. So look for persons who truly want to improve the country, and want to improve the communities, so forth and so on. So I think that's one of the ways, is to engage the individual as opposed to groups of people who because groups strengthen and support each other, and that's what we're talking about here too. We're talking about how do we become the larger group that says that we're going to include as many people as we possibly can, and we're going to show, here's this big word, we're going to show love as opposed to hate and as opposed to fear, because love is a strong thing, but it also makes you vulnerable. Sometimes we don't want to be vulnerable because we don't want to be the ones on the hurting end. But that's what love does. Love says, I took a chance on you. And we've got to get back to that. I think with everything that we talk about, even going to school and studying like evidence-based interventions, things like that, to get us from one point to the next. It all boils down to love. Do you love yourself enough to love somebody else? And I think that's a big issue is that a lot of people who say they love themselves really don't. So that's why it's very difficult for them to love. So, but love makes you vulnerable, but it also is a great hammer as it relates to the nail of hate and faith, of hate and fear rather. So I think do you love yourself? If you love yourself, you're going to treat other people with respect and dignity as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that question from Valerie. So how do we approach being perceived as quote professionals without losing our culture or quote making others feel comfortable?
Okay. That's a great question because I think that you do, it goes back to the love of self. And by loving of self, I'm not talking about being arrogant and conceited and saying somebody is less than who I am, but I mean embracing the fact that you have African blood in you. And that's a beautiful thing. Or if you're Irish, the fact that you've got Irish blood in you, it's a beautiful thing. But when we all come together, we can express our beauty in different ways. Um, I think embracing who you actually are and being content with who you are, as opposed to saying, well, I'm better than you. Because I think when you have the latter, I think it shows a lot of fear and a lot of hate because you probably don't feel like you're better than the other person and that's why you work so hard. But I think if you have a love for yourself, it's not to say I'm better than you, but it's to say, you know what? God didn't make any mistakes. When He made me the way that He wanted to. When He made you, He made a beautiful person as well. And so when we come together, we can celebrate who we are, and then we can celebrate who we are as a group of people as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, David. This has been truly wonderful. As I said before, you brought just so much wisdom to this and just given a lot of like great things to think about. So if folks want to learn more about you, about the work you do, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
The best way to do it is by simply calling me.
Okay.
So I'm old school. I'm very old school. I don't have a website, any of those things. I do have a Facebook account, at least, but as far as I guess you can approach me there, or just simply call me 704 8580 704 8580.
8580.
Yeah.
I love it. Very old school. Uh, well, I'll type that into the comments right now, and we'll also get this video posted on our YouTube channel, Advent Co-working Videos. So if you are new to joining us for this weekly event, Advent Members Talk, you can view all of our previous 40 something different talks from amazing Advent members on various topics. So thank you again, David. And thank you everyone so much for joining us. I hope you will join us again next Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. here on Facebook Live. Our member Josie will be speaking to us about community cats and how we can approach kitten season. So a
All right.
very different topic, but also a very important one. So thank you and hope you all have a great evening.
Thank you.